Let's bring in Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts. He is a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Been a lot of talk about Greenland, Senator. I want you to hear what the Danish foreign minister said to our Brett Baer on Wednesday about the possibility of the U.S. buying Greenland. Listen.
They get $500,000 a person. I mean, you don't think they're going to vote to break away?
No, not at all. Because I think there's no way that U.S. will pay for a Scandinavian welfare system in Greenland, honestly speaking. You haven't introduced a Scandinavian welfare system
but
in
you
your own
also
country.
don't believe the U.S. is going to invade Greenland, do you?
No, at least I do not hope so, because, I mean, that will be the end of NATO.
So let's get your take. I mean, the president says he badly wants Greenland. He's talked about the possibility of mounting some kind of an invasion. Where does this thing stand, do you think?
Well, the president is exactly right with regard to the need to defend our northern flank here. We've seen a lot more activity from Russia and Communist China in the Arctic, and we know that we've got to defend ourselves from that direction. And so he is starting a negotiation with Denmark and Greenland. And as you know, the president doesn't start close to where he hopes to end up. He starts way on the edge of where he hopes to end up. And so I think that this is part of what he's doing in the negotiation. We actually had a chance to meet with the foreign minister and representatives from the Greenland foreign minister as part of our Foreign Relations Committee on Thursday. My understanding is, from talking to them, they met with Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio to begin the discussions, that they're planning on having more discussions with regard to this. So I think this is just the beginning of talking through where we can end up. But it's very clear that we needed to protect ourselves. We need to be able to invest and have certainty with regard to those investments to be able to protect our northern flank. And I believe that's what the president is pursuing, to be able to make sure that he keeps Americans safe.
You heard the foreign minister say that he thought that an attack on Greenland of any kind by the United States would be the end of NATO. And when you look at the countries that have sent troops to NATO, sort of in support, I suppose, of the Danish government and its claims there, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Great Britain, France, Netherlands, Germany, those are, are some of our strongest allies in the world, and they seem to be saying, hey, hands off Greenland. Wouldn't you agree?
Again, I think this is the beginning of a negotiation for President Trump. And we need to remember that it was President Trump who got these NATO countries to finally start spending money on their own defense. If you go back and look in 2014, all these countries agreed to start spending at 2% of their GDP, yet just a few years ago, the only countries that had done it were the United States, the UK, Poland, the Baltic states, and Greece. So the major economies there, for the most part, had not been doing it. It took President Trump really prodding and haranguing them to be able to get them to start spending even after Russia invaded Ukraine. So what I think you see here is, again, the president starting a negotiation where he's prodding on our European allies and working the negotiation from that standpoint. But ultimately, what he's concerned about is making sure that we can defend our northern flank for the long run to keep Americans safe. Reuters
and Ipsos took a poll and asked people whether they approve of the United States acquiring Greenland. It's pretty telling. 17% is the number that said yes. 47% said no. 35% said they are not sure. And then more specifically, a Quinnipiac poll that specifically asked whether we would approve of the United States trying to buy Greenland. The number goes up a little bit. 37% of the total say yes. 55% say they oppose. More support among Republicans on that front than others. So if the president doesn't have a lot of public support in this venture, do you think he will press on?
Well, the president has been very clear that this is about our national defense and national security. And as I've outlined already, we have real cause to fear from the Arctic with regard to what the Communist Chinese are doing and expanding what they're doing up there, what the Russians are doing up there. And frankly, this was part of what we voted for last year, is to expand our Coast Guard to have more icebreakers and so forth, because we are under-equipped with regard to defending ourselves in the Arctic, from the United States standpoint as well. So we need to do more with regard to the Arctic. We need to keep ourselves safe. And if you started to explain what we're doing with Greenland in that context, I think just like any other public policy issue, you have to go to the American people and tell them why this is in our national interest. And when you start doing that, the American people will understand how important it is that we protect ourselves from the potential threats coming from the Arctic.
Let's turn our attention to Iran. The president has also been paying a lot of attention to what's going on in that country. Thousands of people apparently executed, and he says he believes that the United States posture has prevented some more of those summary executions. Here's what the Iranian foreign minister had to say to President Trump on Special Report.
My message is, do not repeat the same mistake that you did in June. If you try a failed experience, you will get the same result. In June, you destroyed the facilities, the machines, but the technology cannot be bombed, and the determination also cannot be bombed.
So he seemed to say that, yes, we destroyed their nuclear program, but, he's trying to turn it into a warning. I don't imagine that kind of talk is going to make much of a difference on what President Trump ultimately decides.
It's a curious defense to say you had a successful air raid on our country where you destroyed nuclear facilities and we could do nothing to stop it, and somehow draw the conclusion that now by supporting the protesters that the Iranian government itself is killing, that somehow this is a warning or a threat to us. What the president is doing is, first of all, he's always going to look out for our interests in the Middle East. He's going to put America first, but he also wants to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to live a peaceful life. And the Iranian people are rising up against their government because the government has failed. It's failed for decades. And despite this failure, the Ayatollah continues to repress his people. And this is very different what the president is doing compared to what President Obama and President Biden did, where they tried an appeasement first strategy. President Trump has said, no, he's going to support these protesters and may take military action. And again, this is where the president is going to take a much different stance and actually try to show peace through strength in the Middle East rather than the appeasement strategy that we saw from both the Obama and the Biden administration.
Americans know how we felt, when inflation was rearing its ugly head a couple of years ago. Iranian inflation right now is at over 42%. So you can understand why people are extremely angry there. Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts, it's good to have you on.